On a stormy night in the Philippines, two women left work and never made it home. The documentary, Give Up Tomorrow, profiles the young man wrongfully accused of their murders and sentenced to death in the country's trial of the century. American University's Human Rights Film Series is kicking off with Give Up Tomorrow to explore the themes of corruption, capital punishment, and political scandal in the Philippines. Give Up Tomorrow has won 16 awards and will be broadcast nationally on POV on October 4th. Documentary filmmaker Michael Collins joins us today to discuss his motivations behind making the film, where the subject is now, and what his plans are moving forward. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's such an honor to have you here talking about your new documentary, Give Up Tomorrow.
Thanks for having me.
So this documentary, I believe, took 7 years to create. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
What exactly got you personally passionate about this project?
When I learned about this story, it's about a young man who's wrongfully convicted in the Philippines. I learned about it in 2004 when this young man, his name's Paco, had already been in jail for 7 years. And I read a letter that was written by all of his witnesses. He had about 35 witnesses who were with him on one island in the Philippines when the crime was happening on another. And I felt the connection to Paco. We were the same age. I had been living in New York City for 7 years at that point. He had been in prison for 7 years, so I just sort of felt a connection to him and a responsibility to try to tell his story and bring it to the world.
This was your first documentary, so what obstacles did you encounter in taking on such a big, complex project?
We encountered so many obstacles. I think one of the biggest ones, I guess, was having our main character be someone who was on death row in the Philippines and having access to them. I was able to go in and visit him a lot. The prisons in the Philippines are much different than they are here. They're essentially walled cities that are run by gangs. The guards generally stay on the outside, and the prisoners sort of govern themselves, and there are, gang wars, and there are guns inside, and all kinds of stuff. But cameras are not allowed inside. You are searched when you go in and stuff like that. So, we knew that we had to include Paco's voice in this film because he wasn't allowed to testify at his own trial. So it took about 4 months, and we finally figured out a way to have a camera smuggled into the prison, and we were able to conduct a whole series of interviews with him. The camera sort of stayed inside and would be hidden in there when we would leave. They would have to bury it sometimes. We'd leave with the tapes. So that was a big obstacle that we overcame early in production.
How did you smuggle the cameras inside?
We essentially had to pay someone off to bring it inside, which is a little ironic because a lot of the film sort of criticizes the corruption in the Philippines. But in this case, we had to sort of take advantage of it in order to get access to Paco.
And I remember reading that Paco was wary of media because he's been misrepresented so many times. So how did you get him to open up to you?
Yeah, that's true. Well, my partner, the producer of the project, Marty Sihuko, his brother is married to Paco's sister. So he didn't know Paco at all. He'd only met him once at their wedding many years ago. So there was that that's what really got us through the door. And then we really had to earn Paco's trust. So when we went to the Philippines, we would spend all of our free time in the prison with him, getting to know him, and just really trying to earn his trust. So it took, it was about 3 months before we ever picked up the camera, before he even agreed to do the interviews with us.
Oh. So were you ever concerned that Marty's relation to Paco would possibly bring the credibility of the film into question?
Wasn't really a concern. I suppose what it really did for us is it gave us access where we wouldn't have it otherwise, because Paco's whole family had been misrepresented by the media so much that they weren't really going to talk to anyone else. And when we said we wanted to make this film, they said, fine, we'll help you get some interviews with witnesses, but we're not going to talk to you. And it was once they saw us working, they said, oh, okay, we'll talk to you now. But really, what Paco's accused of is such a horrible crime. He's accused of kidnap, rape, murder. I think people realize pretty quickly that, some distant in-law of Paco is not going to, be working to exonerate a monster.
So both of you firmly believe in his innocence. How did you maneuver interviewing the prosecutors and the mother of the victim and things like that?
Yeah, really our approach in making this film was to talk to everyone involved on all sides of this story. So that was our approach. You know, it was an independent film, and we were spending a lot of time with the Larrañagas. They knew that. We interviewed, and we just wanted to talk to everyone involved. And we encountered a lot of resistance at first, especially from the police, from the prosecutors, because these are people who, quite frankly, were lying and had something to hide. But with our persistence, after many years, they finally granted us these interviews. And, you know, we just let them speak for themselves. We didn't go in there and attack them. We really just gave them space to tell their side of the story, and then we just put it up on the screen. And I think you can see very clearly who's telling the truth and who's not.
It's a really complex story with many layers. So how did you decide which angle you were going to go with, which I believe like a good portion of the story revolves around the mothers? How did you decide to go down that route?
Yeah, I think I wanted to make a film that I would want to go see, and I love films that are really character oriented, that are, you know, where you can connect with characters emotionally. And you know, when I learned about this story, it really broke my heart when I went and I met the family and I saw how much it had really destroyed their lives, how everything had just fallen apart because of this injustice. So we wanted to try to translate that into a film somehow. So yes, it was important to tell the details of the case and show the injustice and prove that these guys were innocent, but that's kind of the easy part. What we really wanted to work hard at was having strong characters on screen that you could identify with.
So this film is about the Philippines, but it premiered here in New York. Who's your target audience and why?
Our target audience, really this is a universal story, and we've now been touring with it for 18 months all over the world, and we've been really lucky. We've won 16 awards, so we know that it's connecting with audiences everywhere. And I think, you know, here in the US, there's a big audience because the systems in the Philippines are all based on the United States. This injustice that you're seeing is something that we can relate to. You know, there are so many innocent people in prison right here at home, which a lot of people don't realize. I think in the Philippines, the corruption and the injustice is a little more in your face. But certainly it's pointing to flaws that in the system, both in the justice system and problems with, you know, the media and reporting and lack of investigative journalism, those kinds of things that we can all relate to here at home.
In regards to the investigative journalism and the freedom of the press in the Philippines, what did you encounter with the press there? Were they receptive, or was there a lot of resistance?
Well, we reached out to different journalists who had covered the case, and they spoke to us openly. You know, I think it's looking back, we had a lot of archive material for this piece because it was considered the trial of the century there. I mean, this was really big, so there was a lot of footage, and a lot of the coverage was done in a very sensational way, where the facts were not only disregarded, but things were just made up for the sake of ratings and headlines and stuff like that. So that was a little shocking. And there are some journalists who look back and they say, you know, and they apologize for it, and they say we need to atone for what we did back then. And there are others that just say, hey, we were just reporting it as we saw it. So I think it's a, you know, I have to say it's also a very dangerous place to be a journalist in the Philippines. When we were making the film, they had the second highest rate of journalists being murdered in the world after Iraq, and Iraq is a war zone. So it just tells you when people are reporting things that aren't in favor of certain politicians, and the president had weighed in on this case very much against Paco and his co-accused, that it can be dangerous. So I think that affected the reporting as well.
This case went on for over a decade, so where is Paco now?
Now, Paco is actually a dual citizen of the Philippines and Spain because his father is a Spanish national. He was so when he was on death row, as one last sort of ditch effort he reached out to Spain and asked for help, and they responded. They started paying attention to his case. The Amnesty International championed his case. The United Nations Human Rights Committee filed a case against the Philippines in favor of Paco. And what ended up happening was a prisoner exchange treaty came about, and he was transferred over to Spain in 2009. So right now he's out of the dangerous, he's no longer on death row, and now he's in Spain, and he's still in prison, unfortunately.
I know that you're the founder of Thoughtful Robot, which is a production company that champions making social justice films. So do you have any new plans in the works?
Yeah. Well, we have a short film that's going to be premiering soon at the Media That Matters film festival in New York in October, and that's called Gerthy's Roots, and it's about it's set in Haiti, and it's dealing with before and after the earthquake, essentially the environmental issues that are down there, and it's about sort of the youth becoming empowered and taking responsibility for all the problems in their society.
American University is so excited to have you here and be part of the Human Rights film series. So do you have any advice for young journalists or filmmakers?
Any advice? Wow, I would just say, I guess it's a hard road when it took us 7 years to make this film, and we encountered a lot of resistance and a lot of rejection. But I think as long as you just stay focused on the goal, and you kind of let that stuff go, you don't let that kind of don't ever feel defeated. Just just keep on persevering, and you will finish the film, and it'll get the exposure that it deserves. But it's not an easy road, but it's well worth it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure meeting you.
You too.
Thanks for joining us on this edition of ATV Special Broadcast. I'm Nithya Upadhyay. Have a great night.